Thank you, Daniel. It's a pleasure being with everyone today. Looking forward to a good conversation here on stains and varnishes. I realize this kind of subject is maybe somewhat narrow in terms of scope whenever we have the entire coatings products available, but there were some very unique things about stains and varnishes that we kind of felt was worthwhile to develop a program for and to discuss. So as we go through this particular presentation today, as Daniel mentioned, we'd be glad to try to answer questions as we go along and to make this as enjoyable as we can and as informative as we can long distance here. These are just a couple of slides with our AIA notice there because this does have health, safety, welfare credit attached to it. Should you need that, as Daniel mentioned, do the survey. And if you would put your number in there, and we will be glad to get a certificate of completion for you and file that AIA form for you to get your credit. Our learning objectives for today, we're going to review the different kinds of wood finish systems and review the lead requirements for stains and wood finishes. That in and of itself could probably be a good part of the program, and we'll probably spend a little bit of time discussing that because as of November 1st, we have moved on to a new version of LEED. LEED V4 now is the only platform that you can register a LEED project under, and there are some significant changes with paint as we move forward into the new V4 program. Discuss the differences between water-based and solvent-based materials and the safety and health concerns with these products, and then learn renewable resource options used in the finishing systems, including fish oil, tongue oil, and Danish oil, among others. The nice thing about wood finishes, actually, is the fact that there are quite a few renewable resins that can be used, so there are more than one way to do a wood finish these days. Some of the common wood types that we'll talk about and are unique in their nature is oak, maple, cherry, walnut, mahogany, pine, and poplar. And both of these are broken into two different systems or two different categories of hardwoods versus softwood. And each of these has its own unique situation. So with sanding, you know, when we're going through our surface preparation, you see sand, sand, sand there. And really that is kind of the key factor to any kind of wood preparation is to get it to as smooth the capacity as we can to minimize any kind of roughness and to minimize any kind of particulates on the surface that might mar that finish. I'm sure you've seen beautiful wood finishes, and I'm sure you've seen some that aren't so beautiful. And a beautiful wood finish is a work of art to a certain degree because it takes a fine hand and it takes some effort to get you to that. A smoother surface is important to a good wood finish because of the fact that we want to make sure that that grain is minimized and that we have a surface that will accept a stain and varnish readily, and that whenever we put those finishes on, that there is not any kind of particulate in the surface that would create any kind of imperfection necessary to create any kind of flaw, if you will. Filling the grain on some woods, such as oak, is important. In all the time that I have been in the paint business, quite honestly, I have really never seen much oak that's needed filled. That's not to say it doesn't, and it's not to say that it doesn't get done, and especially in cabinet shops and so on, finer finishes, you probably will see that. And that is something that you will have in most paint specifications whenever it comes to the stains and varnishes section, is you will normally have a filler product as part of the oak system if you're doing oak as such. Now, we have a comment down here about what about using liquid sandpaper. Liquid sandpapers are basically solvents that will rough a surface up, and they're really not a good replacement for sandpaper. I know that ease of application and ease of getting a project done is a big thing that we all like to look forward to, but there's really nothing to replace sanding, whether that be by hand or that be by mechanical means and so on. It's an important thing to do. And whenever we talk about sanding, we want to start with a rubber sandpaper, a rubber grit, and go move to a finer grit. And that may require going through several different grades or grits of sandpaper to get to that surface level. But that is dependent upon the individual, it's dependent upon your design criteria as to how smooth that finish is and what kind of finish we get to. So again, application is a huge issue here, and surface preparation is the beginning point as it is with virtually any kind of paint finish, but specifically with wood finishes here, it's extremely important. So we have different kinds of stains. Once we get that surface prepped properly, then we'll start looking at the stains that we want to use and what kind of color maybe we want to get on that wood, and get to the uniformity of color. So we have solvent-based, and we have basically three different types here, where we add the tint, the premix, and the dye stains aspect of things. Where we add tint to the base is we can actually give you a wider range of color with that particular tint system, using the tinted solvent-based systems. The issue there, though, is that you can also get to a point where the color becomes muddy. And we're going to talk about a couple different ways of getting to color standards on this here in a minute. But just kind of keep in mind that the premixed products and the dye stains will probably get us to a little cleaner color, and will get us a little more uniformity in color. Again, if we're kind of going for a very, very dark color, we can sometimes, with the solvent-based add tint products, get it somewhat muddy. So there's a fine line there where we have to kind of stop with those before we can create more of an issue than we want to there. With the premixed products, those are the ones you will normally see right on the shelf, whether that be golden oak or that be antique maple or whatever it happens to be. There's multiple different premixed package materials that can get you a very, very good finish also. And then finally, we have dye stains. Commonly used in cabinet shops, because normally these are intermix systems to get to the color that you want. And these are very fast drying and fast recoat time, but we can get those really deep, rich colors with those dye stains. So that's kind of the three basic ways of staining. And whether those are solvent-based or whether those are water-based, we have both options available. Depending upon the premix particularly, there are a majority of stains that are available in a water-based also.
Ken, we have a quick question. What's the difference between a stain and a varnish?
Well, the stain is actually the color coat. It really doesn't add any protective value to the surface, whereas a varnish or polyurethane or any of the finish coats that we're going to talk about do add a level of protection to the wood to keep any kind of, they'll take the wear and tear. It's kind of maybe give it an example, would be if we were using a prime coat in a paint system. We normally don't leave those prime coats uncovered because of the fact that the primers are made up in a little different manner, and they don't have the same wear and tear consistency that the finishes do. So we put the primer down, and then we put the two finish coats over the top of that. The same way with these wood systems, we put the stain down to achieve the color and get to the color degree that we want to, and then we put the varnishes or polyurethanes or any other products over the top of those to give us the protective value to the wood. I hope that kind of answers the question. But all right, so getting into selecting stain colors, this is an example of some common stain samples you may see at a hardware store, paint store, or home center. Take strips of wood and then stain those and varnish those and put those out there as examples. And they're great for examples, but they're really not going to be a great indicator. I mean, they'll get you in the range. I don't want to misconstrue this. It will get you in the range. But if you kind of take a look at these two samples, one of these is a water-based stain line, and the other one is a solvent-based stain line. And you can see some significant difference between the color and the grain between those samples. So to that degree, you can get that variance because the wood itself is, the grain and the color of the wood affect the stain color overall. So whenever we're looking at these things, if we're involved in a commercial project or some place that we're going to do a lot of stain and varnishing, we may want to actually get actual samples of wood from that project to do the stain samples on. That would be the best way. If we can have the actual wood that's being used, we can be more accurate with that, and that's something you may need to add into the specification, especially if you're going to have some wood finishes on there that are going to be integral to the project. So understanding the number of samples that are required, the size of those samples, if you want a 4-inch by 4-inch sample or an 8-inch by 8-inch sample, whatever size it happens to be, that would be good information to include in the specification so that as we are moving forward with submittals and doing color submittals and so on, we can get you the appropriate size and type of products that you want or samples that you need to be able to make an informed decision about the color generated. So who's responsible for collecting these samples is another piece of information that is good to have, because if we have multiple places we need to send these samples to, if we have an owner that we need to send them to, as well as an architect or general contractor, it's always good to have that information so that we can keep the process moving forward and not have to wait and maybe cause some time delay trying to collect information. So with different kinds of wood finishes, we've kind of talked about the stain aspect of things. We talked a little bit about color. So let's talk about, we're going to talk about these in sequence here between shellac, tung oil, linseed oil, and Danish oil, and lacquer, and conversion varnishes, and acrylic finishes, and sanding steelers and varnishes. A lot there, but we'll kind of cover this quickly because some of these kind of are similar in nature. With shellac, and this is a renewable resource here. This is one of the nice things about shellac. It's made from the secretions of the Southeast Asia lac bug. So we take those flakes are collected, and then they're dried into flakes, and then they're cut into a shellac base, or denatured alcohol being the solvent here, and put into suspension in that denatured alcohol. There's white shellac and there's orange shellac, both of those having a unique color characteristic to it. If you've ever seen any old tongue and groove boards in old homes, orange shellac was a very popular finish back in the day for those kind of things. So you don't see shellac as often today as maybe you did back in the day. It's a good vertical wood finish. I'm a little skeptical on horizontal surfaces and so on because it can leave you can leave water rings and things of that nature on it. But it's easy to fix if you do have any damage with that. The denatured alcohol, whenever you apply another coat over the top of it, it melts back into each other. So it's a relatively easy to fix finish. It's in 2-pound cuts and 3-pound cuts. Those are the two common types, fast drying. And one of the things you may actually use shellac for these days is pigment shellac. I mean, if you're sealing knotholes to paint over them, or if you're doing any kind of a prime coat on that tongue and groove material that I mentioned before, these pigmented shellac act as a really good prime coat underneath the paint system. They can clean it up with water or denatured alcohol, with ammonia water, I should say, and denatured alcohol, which makes them a very easy to clean up product and easy to use product, and it's also easy touch up. So it's got its benefits to it. Again, there are a few places you probably wouldn't want to put it, but for the most part, it would be an easy one-coat, two-coat type of system that is very readily available. So knothole sealers, paneling, wood projects that not take a lot of wear and tear. As you see, we have a tabletop type thing there, just because of that water staining aspect of things and water marking aspect of it. And it's not very moisture or heat resistant. So again, that tongue and groove paneling type of thing on the sidewall would be a great place to use something like that. But it does have its uses, and it needs to be careful where you put it. The penetrating oils are kind of similar in nature. These are all renewable resources. The tung oil is made by pressing nuts from the tung tree, and it's good again on horizontal surfaces. Linseed oil is made by pressing flax seed, and you have raw and boiled linseed oil that are two different kind of grades there. Edible and healthy, slow drying, needs multiple coats. I wouldn't necessarily try eating raw linseed oil necessarily. I am not a health food novice, so I really won't try to speak to that level of things, but in the research it did show that these are edible oils. With the boiled version of it, it dries a hard finish, and that's really where we mostly see these used in wood finishes, is with the boiled linseed oil. Danish oil is a blend between tung oil and varnish. It may require multiple coats to get to the level of sheen that you want with these, but they are a very nice product in terms of their depth of color and their depth of durability. A lot of times with these particular products, and actually with these particular products, stain is not necessary. The color of the Danish oil, the linseed oil, the tung oil themselves help to accentuate the color of the wood. And so normally you don't see stain being used along with these pre-finishes. But again, we're talking about sustainability. These are renewable resources in these particular type of penetrating oils. Lacquer is another one that's been around for a long time. You think in terms of the Chinese cabinets and things of that nature that are very, very hard and very, very slick finishes. These lacquers are made from nitrocellulose polymers, and they're dissolved in a lacquer thinner. Now, lacquer thinner is a very flammable material. And I'm going to back up one slide here 1 second because I want to make one other comment while I'm talking about these solvents.
And
you understand your
yeah, we also had a question on this slide. Do the oils need to be retreated over time, thus making a maintenance issue?
They can be, but again, once those oils are dried, anytime that you put another coat on top of them, you're building this to finish this up. These don't re-wet the same way that shellac does. Whenever you put another coat of shellac on top of each other, these particular products, once they're dry, whenever you put another coat on top of it, then you're building another finished coat over the top of it. But yes, they can be recoated if necessary, or if there some scratching occurs and so on. They can be recoated with themselves the same way that most of these finishes can be.
Thank you.
So I've got the slide, down here on the bottom of the slide, you see dangerous spontaneous combustion with these types of products. The products themselves are not so much dangerous for spontaneous combustion. It's the rags that you may use to transfer the oil to the wood surface that can be a problem. And I really do want to discuss this briefly because this is a potential flammability issue. If you ever use these kind of oils, that the rags need to be disposed of properly, and that would be in an airtight container with water in it, to take those rags and to immerse them in the water in that airtight container so that they cannot spontaneously combust. There are story after story of people taking those rags and throwing them together and leaving them on a garage floor or whatever, and then coming back to the garage burn down. And these issues, these spontaneous combustion issues do occur, so be very careful with the way that you dispose of any kind of rags. Or on a commercial project, if you're specifying any of these kind of finishes, make sure that the rags are being handled properly on site so that they do not create a fire hazard. That kind of lacquer is, although we're not talking about rag issues here, lacquer thinners are a very flammable solvent. They have a relatively low flash point to them, so they can flash relatively easily. Good air movement and so on is very important anytime that you're using these finishes, just to make sure that you're not building up enough of the solvent vapor to create any kind of flash point. Lacquers are more durable than shellac in their nature. That normally requires multiple coats to achieve the finish that you like to achieve. They're very fast drying, up to 4 times faster dry than polyurethane finishes, so you can put multiple coats on in a day. But the solvent is flammable and it does have an odor, so some of these things do smell. And this is going to be somewhat germane as we get further into our slides and actually talk about the LEED criteria for wood finishes. So where we use these at: furniture, doors, trim, cabinets, paneling, molding. Don't use them on floors. They're just not as resistant to footwear and to traffic on floors as we would like. But in terms of fine wood finishes, you see lacquers used a lot. These are finishes you can field apply these finishes, but they're mostly applied in cabinet shops or in a controlled environment. You do have to normally spray these particular products. There are some brushing lacquers, but the vast majority of these things are spray applications. And to that degree, you need specialized equipment, normally that being a air gun type thing, where you actually have a cup gun that's attached to a compressor to spray these finishes. So to that degree, you have to have some specialized equipment in most cases. And again, having a controlled environment where we minimize dust and can maybe sand in one area and then have a finishing room strictly for finishes so that we keep any kind of dust or particular contaminants out of that area would be most desirable. Conversion varnishes are similar to the lacquers, but the fact that these are catalyzed varnish systems, again, used in cabinet shops mostly. They're hard and durable. That conversion aspect of things makes them a very, very hard finish. They're clear, slightly amber in color, and they do have a pot life once they're catalyzed. So, again, these are finishes you don't normally see used in a field application, but they really can add value whenever we're talking about using them in a cabinet shop. Multiple coats are normally required. Again, they're relatively fast dry, so you can put multiple coats on in a day. Things with xylene or toluene, both of those solvents, again, are highly flammable. So the xylene and toluene do have an odor to them also. So if we're actually trying to use any of these kind of finishes on site, it's in a new construction situation may not be as detrimental as if we're in a occupied space. There, and again, part of the issue with these solvents is the fact that they can create the odor aspect of it and be somewhat hazardous to other people's health if they're exposed to them. So we need to be careful about where we're using these type of finishes. Waterborne versions are available of conversion varnishes, so that is helpful too, and will minimize the VOC aspect of it and the odor aspect of it to a certain extent. All right, that kind of brings us more into finishes that we're probably more familiar with, waterborne acrylic finishes. It's a self-cross-linking technology. In and of itself, as it dries, it cross-links, and so it's a nice hard finish. Waterborne is typically lower VOC than solvent-based are, but and we normally have a pretty decent sheen range available from gloss and semi-gloss to satin sheens. Nice thing here, soap and water cleanup, so we're not talking about the same kind of solvent issues that we have with some of the past finishes we were talking about. Dries to recoat in a couple hours and tack-free in an hour. So again, we get really relatively quick recoat time on these things, and then we can brush pad paint or paint pad in the spray application with these things. And if you're not familiar with paint pads, paint pad is actually a soft cloth pad that goes on the end of probably a 4-inch pole that you can put the finish on the floor, kind of pour it out in a rope, and then pull it down with the paint pad to actually give you a uniform finish on that surface. It's an easier way to apply, and you'll notice that with none of these finishes, we talk about roller application of wood finishes. And the biggest reason for that is we don't want to roll any air into these finishes. And whenever you're talking about a roller, whether you're even using a very, very thin nap roller, the propensity is to roll air into that finish. And in so doing, then that air has to come back out, and that air entrapment will create little fissures and create a pattern like an orange peel effect on the surface, which is normally not very much appreciated when it comes to wood finishes. So, and there again, any kind of imperfection that you normally get into a wood finish, you can normally sand it out and hit it with another coat or two of finish, and they are really kind of self-healing relatively easily. So with these waterborne acrylic finishes, furniture, doors, cabinets, paneling, molding, any place where common household resistance, I can say this, common household chemicals resistance is needed, you can use these particular finishes. But there again, we're not going to put these on floors either, because again, we want a very hard finish on floors that can keep up with the wear and tear and the scuffing nature of foot traffic. And so these would not be our best finish for that particular type of surface. Now, let's talk about a kind of unique product in the whole varnishes line of things. Sanding sealers are kind of the primer coat underneath varnishes. And I'm not going to say polyurethanes at all here, because I'm going to say varnishes, because sanding sealers and varnishes go together as a system. You can put a sanding sealer down on the wood, and the reason we use a sanding sealer as a seal coat over new, well-prepared wood, and then sand that sanding sealer, and that's part of the benefit of these things, is they sand very nicely, and they powder up nice and wipe off nice, so that whenever you come back with a varnish finish over the top of them, you have a very smooth, well-sealed surface to put your varnish on top of. We typically don't want to coat with oil-based sanding sealer with an oil-based polyurethane. The chemistries between the sanding sealer and the polyurethane is different, and we can get delamination between coats using the sanding sealer and polyurethane. And we'll talk a little bit more about polyurethanes here in a minute. But with solvent-based alcohol oil, nitrocellulose lacquer, or water-based styrene acrylic versions are available in these sanding sealers. But just to make sure that you're keeping a lacquer-based sanding sealer with lacquers and that a varnish-based sanding sealer with varnishes. We want to make sure that they're lined up appropriately with the finish coats they're going to be used with. Now, these sanding sealers for varnishes is also available in alkyd or water-based finishes, water-based versions, and that's fine. You can use a water-based version or an alkyd version underneath the appropriate varnish. But just make sure whenever you're looking at labels that the labels are compatible between the sanding sealer and the varnish. There should be some information on those labels that will help you to identify that that is part of an entire system. If you're not seeing that on the label, certainly ask the paint professional at the paint store or in the home center, whoever you may be talking with, or in your specifying these things, certainly talk to your paint professional to make sure that we are helping you to get the appropriate specification together so that the system is correct as it goes out to bid. So it acts as a base coat of sealed wood for better uniform finish and color and coat holdout. So that's important there that, again, with these sanding seal or varnish finishes, that we have this available to make a well-sealed surface. And again, coming back with those varnish finishes over the top of it to make a complete system. So sanding seals should always be finished with a top coat. They are not a standalone product, but in using them as a base coat and then coming back with the varnishes over the top of that, the furniture, doors, trim, cabinets, paneling, molding, about most places where you would like to have a fine finish would make up a good system here with the sanding sealer. Alkyd oil and water base can be used on floors, but must be finish coated with varnish. There again, it's important that we are paying attention to systems here and make sure that we have the appropriate sanding sealer lined up with the appropriate varnish or the appropriate substrate. So some of these, as you look on the label, may say that they're not recommended for floors, but for the most part, most of the varnish finishes can be used on floors the same way polyurethane finishes can be used on floors. So as we move more into this whole varnish conversation, they're alkyd resins blended with mineral spirits. They're amber in appearance. They do have a bit of a color to them already. They're a hard, durable finish. Solvent versions are available and water versions are available. And they're not quite as durable as a polyurethane finish. We're kind of building up to our best option here, but this has been around forever. I mean, you probably are familiar with these varnish systems, probably have put them on at home yourself. So they're a very usable, very easy to apply type finish. And again, if we put them together in the appropriate system, then we can use that sanding seal or varnish and get a very, very nice look with these products. Pretty much any place you want to use these things, we can get into the handrails and spindles, stair treads and risers. Pretty much any place you want to, that you need a wood finish, you can use a varnish finish. Now that kind of brings us to polyurethanes. And when we're talking commercial construction and we're talking about the best finish for field application and the most durable and most easy to use finish, I'm kind of a real believer in polyurethanes because they give us everything that we pretty much need in a commercial space. They're resistant to abrasion and marring, they're self-leveling, no brush marks normally, enhances finish on wood or unfinished wood, resist alcohol and common household cleaners. And there again, that's a big component there because we really don't know what these surfaces are going to be cleaned with once they're put into service. And so if we can have something that's pretty forgiving across the board, then that's a nice thing to have. There are solvent-borne versions and waterborne versions available. And many of these polyurethane finishes are not LEED compliant, and then we need to check with applicable LEED restriction before specifying solid-based varnishes or polyurethanes. And again, we'll talk about that in a little more detail in our last slide before we get into the non-proprietary part of our presentation today. One thing I would say to you about polyurethanes is kind of one product fits all. Because with a polyurethane, instead of using a sanding sealer, we would take the polyurethane, thin it down 10–15%, use that as the base coat, and then sand in between coats and come back with another coat of polyurethane on top of that, sand between that coat, and then come back with a finish coat or two of polyurethane on top of that. The reason I mentioned sanding in between coats is, again, to get to that smoothness and get to that level where we don't have any imperfections in the wood, it's really important to sand with a relatively fine sandpaper. We can get down into the 220 ranges or into the 100 range, the 220 ranges. I mean, the sandpaper goes to extremely fine finishes, but just enough to be able to take any kind of imperfections off the surface and give us just a little bit of surface profile for the next coat of polyurethane to go on top of. And again, normally a 3, maybe even 4 coat system of polyurethane on a commercial project will give us a very nice wood finish. We could use that for multiple different substrates. So we can use it on floors, we could use it on cabinets, trims, doors, bare wood floors, doors and frames, wherever we may want to use that polyurethane system will work extremely well.
Ken, another question came in. In which category do the products used for gym floors fall?
Well, that's kind of a unique one because with gym floors, it's probably one we're not going to get involved in too much in this particular presentation, but moisture-cured urethanes would be one that's used a lot for rock maple that's used in basketball floors. Those moisture-cured urethanes are similar to the polyurethane family, but they are catalyzed by taking on oxygen or taking on moisture from the air. So whenever you open the can of moisture-cured urethane, then depending upon what the humidity is will depend upon how quickly those things cure out. But moisture-cured urethanes in and of themselves is kind of a whole different category because we're not really talking about any kind of catalyzed finishes here. But the moisture-cured urethanes come in a pigmented version as well as a clear version. And that makes them extremely durable because of that cross-linking aspect of things. They can put up with some of the wear and tear that maybe some of these single component products would not be able to come close to holding up under. But if we need to talk about moisture-cured urethanes and so on, please, we can do that as a sidebar and certainly get you some information about those if you have need for that.
Thanks, Ken.
Okay, now, wood finishes that can be used exteriorly. Spar varnish or polyurethanes can be used exteriorly under the spar version of varnish. Interior-exterior varnish for polyurethane. Some of these polyurethanes are interior-exterior in nature, and then spar varnishes are very moisture-resistant varnishes that can be used, actually can be used above the waterline in marine applications. That's kind of where they got some of their first entrance into wood finishes is back in the day whenever speedboats and so on were built out of wood. These spar varnishes were the finish coat that were desired in that particular circumstance. They're UV resistant, but they can still be attacked by UV. And anytime that you're using a clear finish, if you're doing exterior wood doors or so on, just know that's going to be a maintenance issue. If there is any way that these doors can be set back so that they do have some shading and they don't take full sun all day long, would be more desirable than putting them out there where they catch full sunlight at all times. They do become a maintenance issue, and so recoating those exterior finishes does become an issue over a period of time. Every couple, 3 years maybe would be necessary depending upon what kind of sunlight that they get exposed to. Many of these polyurethane finishes, as we said before, are not LEED compliant, so we need to make sure we're checking proper codes. And anything exteriorly with a wood finish, just keep in mind that you get in it, so it's a maintenance issue. Oh, we do have moisture-cured urethanes in there. I thought we had dropped that particular slide out of here. So forgive me. I guess I'm speaking a little amiss. But moisture-cured urethanes, again, they're a very hard, durable finish, available in clear colors. And then, again, basketball floors, it's a chief element for where we can use these things. So the cross-linking aspect of it is really kind of unique in the fact that it doesn't take a catalyst per se like we would in other cross-link products, but that it actually picks up moisture from the air. So that kind of raises the question, okay, well, if I'm in a very arid environment and we don't have a lot of humidity, well, sometimes you have to actually miscoat these with water to get them to cure. So you have to be kind of careful with them to a certain degree, especially on very, very humid days. They can cross-link in the can, and you have to kind of be careful that we don't have too much humidity either. So they're a little bit quirky in the nature of whenever you use them, but very durable and extremely hard finishes, and something that has a very unique place in the wood finishes market. So basketball floors, hardwood floors, cabinets, furniture would all be places for these moisture-cured urethanes. Okay, now whenever we talk about UV-cured wood finishes, these are factory-applied finishes, very durable. They use UV light to cure these. As the coating's applied in the factory, then they run them under a UV light on the end of the run, and then they can virtually take these finishes off the end of the manufacturing line and pack them for shipment. They come in solvent-based and water-based versions, and the immediate hardness and is available once the product has been cured under that UV light. This is something that you see very often on manufactured wood floors and those kind of things, pre-finished hardwood flooring, cabinets, furniture. This is normally not a field-applied wood finish, and it's not easy touch of it when it's damaged. So this is not something that we would see as a field finish for commercial construction. But again, it's a very, very good finish whenever we're talking about pre-finished hardwood flooring and things of that nature. Maybe even in furniture, commercial furniture, these UV cured finishes may be used and give you a very durable and chemical resistant and solvent resistant finish. All right, let's talk about LEED v4. Because when it comes to wood finishes, herein is a problem, if you will, or an issue to discuss with the paint side of things and with paint specification. As you can see here, the VOC requirements for interior wiping stains is less than 250 grams per liter for stains, and then sanding steel is less than 275 grams per liter, and varnish is less than 275, and lacquer is less than 275. Now, another component is not just the VOC components of the paint product or the varnish products and stain products, but it's also whether they can pass small chamber testing or the general emissions evaluation. And there are none that I am aware of currently that can meet that small chamber testing aspect of things. And 90% of the products that are used on a LEED v4 project have to be small chamber tested. That leaves us a window of 10% that we could conceivably use for stains and varnishes if necessary. But that's that's based on volume, so we'd have to kind of do the calculation on what kind of volume was used in comparison to what kind of stains and varnishes and whether we make that 10% cut or not. If it's not possible to work through the LEED v4 documentation to get these products onto a project, then certainly the options available to apply the stains and varnishes off-site and then bring them on-site and install at that point in time. So there's more than one way to get to the end result here. But with LEED version 4, we have to be very, very careful about the wood finishes aspect of it. I was involved in a situation here in Nashville just a couple of weeks ago on exactly the same circumstance. And in doing the evaluation on this thing, it looked as though the best option for this particular project was to stain and varnish off-site and then bring those components on-site and install. So keep those two things in mind whenever you're working through this, that we may need to actually do applications off-site or be very, very careful in the amount of product that we put on-site under that 10% offshoot that we have available there.
We had a couple of questions come in, Ken. You knew this was going to raise some questions. The first one I think is fairly simple. Any major changes from LEED v3 that they need to be aware of with the VOC requirements?
Yeah, the small chamber testing aspect of it that's the major one, because under LEED 2009 we did not have to do small chamber testing. We just had to meet the criteria of the lower VOC categories. And now under the LEED version 4 aspect of things, then again we have that 90% bucket that we have to have products small chamber tested. And what small chamber testing is basically we submit samples to a third-party agency, verification agency. They put them into a chamber and they actually read the off-gassing of that product over, I think it's a 2-week period of time. Now, don't hold me to that exact standard, but I do believe it's a 2-week period of time. And they record all of the off-gassing that comes off of that particular finish. It's a pass-fail test. and either you pass or you fail. You really don't have too many options on that thing. But normally things of a solvent nature that have a high solvent capacity to them, and the 275, 250 ranges would be considered a higher capacity solvent product, normally will not pass. Matter of fact, to a large extent, we don't even put those in for small chamber testing because it's kind of a waste of money to even test those, knowing what the VOC content is and knowing what kind of threshold we have to meet on the small chamber testing. So, are there water-based finishes available? So far, I've not been able to identify any that I'm aware of that do meet this. Certainly, that is a category that we're going to continue to work on to try to get to a level where we can have small chamber testing available on these wood finishes and to try to have a more complete line of all finishes available to use on these V4 projects. But this is a particular category right here that we have to be very careful with and that we have to spend a little bit more time evaluating to make sure that we can move forward under a V4 project.
The term crosslink is often used for solvent-based products. Can you please define this term?
Yes. Cross-linking is there's a couple of different ways that there are some things that are called pre-catalyzed, and then there are some things that are cross-linked or catalyzed. The pre-catalyzed products, we have those in a wealth of different kind of products. There's a catalyst aspect to those things that is already added at the factory, and they are ready to apply. Once you pop the lid off the top of it, it's pre-catalyzed, and whenever it's applied to the surface to dry, then there's a catalyzation aspect of it that goes along with those products that makes them more durable than a non-catalyzed product. Now, if we're talking about two-component products, the catalyzation aspect of that is you normally have a part A and a part B. You blend those two products together, and there is normally a dwell time, maybe 10, 15 minutes. They have to sit there and kind of mix together or dwell together before they actually begin to cross-link. But that cross-linking aspect of it is a chemical reaction between two different resin types that, whenever cured, gives you different features and benefits than a non-cured or non-catalyzed product. Is that making sense?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Hang on. I think I know the answer to this, but I'll let you answer it. Can you get around the VOC requirement by purchasing products in quarts instead of gallons?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, we've had the availability of doing that to meet some California standards over the years for lower VOC, for higher VOC products. It is my understanding that and I'm not sure that it's incorporated in the LEED V4, but I do believe that is going away as an option. But in this particular circumstance, no, because we're based upon the 250, 275 grams per liter type aspect of things, and regardless of what the package size is on it, we still have to go with what the rating of that product is. So in that particular circumstance, I think I'd have to answer no on that. But again, this whole LEED V4 aspect of thing is it's kind of a new scenario, and there are some different interpretations on some of this stuff, so I'm finding out. I've been through a couple of LEED V4 projects recently, and where we have one idea about a particular category or a particular segment of the LEED V4 category, sometimes the LEED specialists have a different idea on that. So there is some conversation going on some of these things right now, but I think when it comes to wood finishes particularly, we're pretty cut and dried. We've got that 10% window work under it, or working off site if we need to be able to meet the wood finishes need aspect of things.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, let's move on here. We have some comparison charts here, and I'm just going to kind of run through these relatively quickly. We kind of pulled these off Wikipedia and kind of tweaked them ourselves, but I want to give Wikipedia credit for or the comparison charts. And you'll see here we got the wax, shellac, nitrocellulose lacquer, and pre-cat lacquers and conversion varnishes involved linseed oil, tongue oil. We have all these different finishes down here with the appearance, protection, durability, handling precautions, ease of application, reversibility, and rubbing qualities for your review. It's, again, a matter of what's going to be the best thing to fit your particular need, what its requirements, if we're looking at a very, very aggressive surface that we want to put wood finish on, then we need to make sure that we're putting the right finish on there so that we can minimize the maintenance and not make things more difficult on the maintenance folks than necessary. And again, I'd say if we had to pick one product line, that's kind of a one-size-fits-all aspect of things. I'm very prone to move to polyurethanes as being that system. Again, it's an easy field to apply system, relatively easy to prep for, and again, they dry fast enough that you can get maybe not multiple coats per day, but you should be able to get a coat per day anyway, and minimize the amount of time that would take to finish a project. So if you wanted one size fits all, I would look at polyurethanes. If you are into fine wood finishes and so on, then most definitely the tongue oils, the Danish oils, and linseed oils and so on have a really interesting place in the wood finishes line aspect of things. So again, I guess one of my favorite comments when it comes to talking about paint finishes or wood finishes in general is it depends, because there is very rarely is there a one size fits all. Normally the unique circumstances of a project will dictate which finish is best for that particular project. So if you're prone to cut and paste your specifications from one project to the next, might I suggest making sure that we at least look at the substrates of the next project and make sure that they properly align and that it's the same wear and tear capabilities as the past project. So I'm not getting into things too broad range there, but in thinking about wood finishes, that's extremely important, because if we're using a varnish finish in one project and then we move it to another project and a polyurethane would be better suited for that particular project, then we're not doing the owner or the maintenance folks any favors by taking a lesser system and applying it to a different project. So each project needs to be looked at for its own merits and make sure that we're using the appropriate finishes. And that's extremely important when we're talking about LEED version 4 and making sure we're aligned properly there. All right, if there's not any other questions, then I think we have pretty much come to the end, and this is our summary here, and I think we have pretty much covered all of our original talking points. So if we have any other questions, we'll be glad to approach those. If not, I've got a 2-hour and 15-minute commercial for you here. That was supposed to be a joke. So, it's not going to be quite that long. Commercial for you on the backside for PPG paint. So Daniel, do we have any more questions?
Well, one last question that was early on. Will the slides be available for download afterwards?
These are copyrighted programs, so to that degree, if you need specific pieces of information or like specific pieces of information, I can make those available to you. But the entire program won't be available for download per se. But I'd be very happy to offer any individual pieces of information if anybody needs.
Very good.
All right. All right. Just a brief thing about PPG Paints. We are the largest paint company in the world, actually, under PPG Industries. I've actually moved from that particular name to PPG as our corporate name. PPG Paints is a brand underneath PPG. We have more than 2,400 company-owned stores and independent dealers nationwide. We are a global leader in paints and coatings. You'll pretty much find us in every part of the coatings market space. This particular year, we have our color of the year as Paradise Found, as this beautiful green. If you go to voiceofcolor.com is our website for color, and we have a wealth of color information available on that website. And when it comes to wood finishes, Depth Wood Finishes is our interior wood finish line. Flood and Sequence Prolux are our exterior wood finishes. We own those 3 brands and are very proud to have those as part of our offering. If you need any information on any of those products, you're certainly welcome to contact me, and I can get you in touch with them. Matthews Paint is one of our paint companies. It's actually a very specialized company. They're in the sign business. While this doesn't have anything to do with wood finishes per se, Matthews is one of those quiet companies that exists in the PPG portfolio that we just want to kind of get a little name recognition out there for. But if you have anything to do with signs or anything of specifying any paint finishes for signs, then Matthews Paint would be the folks that we would want you to talk with, or we would be very happy to direct you towards. All right, well, this is my contact information. It's been it's a great pleasure to be with you today. If you've got any questions along the way or anything I could do to help direct you to any parts of our PPG Paints offerings, I would certainly be available to you to do that. And again, my name's Kile, and it's been a real pleasure to be part of the CSINext chapter today. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, Kent. One last question on the products. Does PPG offer a gym floor coating product?
Like a moisture urethane, I guess you're asking about?
It's similar to, I don't do gym floors, so I'm going to say it's pronounced Hilliard's.
Well, as far as those kind of floor finishes go, we're going to probably work with an outside vendor to help you with that. There are some things that we offer, again, in that desk line. We have a wealth of different products available that when it comes to gym floors and so on, they are a very specialized aspect of wood finishes, and we will work with one of our vendors, whether that be a Gemini or another company inside of our wood finishes group, to be able to get you an appropriate paint system or appropriate varnish system, I should say, for that particular substrate.
Okay.
Again, it's a pleasure being with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kent. And we really appreciate the presentation. And we also appreciate the fact that PPG is a continuing sponsor of CSINext. And until next month, everyone, thank you very much.